Alrighty, let's talk about genetic basics. So there's going to be a lot of complicated terms in here. Just relax and pay attention, and this will all make sense eventually, I promise. So you are made up of cells. Cells have DNA in them, which control basically everything your body does. DNA is organized into sections called chromosomes, and then the chromosomes are organized into sections called genes, and then the genes are organized into sections called codons, and the codons code for amino acids, and when you take a bunch of amino acids together, they make a protein, which makes up you. So let's talk about each one of those in detail. So I'm going to do DNA first. So DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's not that hard to say, I promise. And they call it deoxyribonucleic acid because the sides of the ladder are made of a sugar called deoxyribose, and then the actual rungs of the ladder, the stuff here in the middle, is made of nucleic acid, hence deoxyribonucleic acid. Now, DNA looks like this twisted ladder here, and you will notice that the inside is made up of different labeled thingies. There are 4 different nitrogenous bases in DNA. They're adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine. And you'll notice in the ladder that A and T only go together and only G and C go together. This is because if you look at the actual molecules, they fit together like puzzle pieces in that way. So if you were to really zoom in on your DNA, it would look like this twisted ladder thing. Now, RNA is kind of like DNA's little friend, except it only is half of the ladder. It only has one side, and it still has the little rungs in the middle. And you'll see that it still has the nitrogenous bases. However, instead of thymine, it does not have thymine. It has uracil instead. So A pairs with U in this case. All right, and it's called ribonucleic acid because the sugar is called ribose. And again, nucleic acid because the rungs are made of nucleic acid. All right, so now DNA is divided into 23 pairs of chromosomes. This picture here is called a karyotype, meaning it's a picture of all the DNA, of all the chromosomes in your body. You'll notice that there are 22 normal pairs of DNA. They're organized by size. 1 is the biggest, 22 is the smallest. And then for your last one, your 23rd pair, you have 2 options pretty much, either XY or XX. If you're this one, you're typically female. If you're XY, you're typically a guy. So you have 23 pairs total. Now, each one of these little squiggles is 1 chromosome. So if you count them all together, you have 46 total. And with each pair, one comes from mom and the other one comes from dad, which is why you tend to look like your parents. All right. Now, we call those pairs homologous pairs. So each one of these things here is a homologous pair. You have 23 of them and 23 individual chromosomes from mom and dad, respectively. Now, if you were to divide up your chromosomes into a smaller section, those would be genes. Genes are specific sections of the molecule that code for specific things. We have anywhere from 20,000 to 25,000 genes. And there are also different forms of genes called alleles. So you get different alleles from your mom and your dad, and they can be dominant or recessive. And we'll talk more about this later with Punnett squares. But let's say for eyes, for example, brown eyes are typically dominant, blue eyes are typically recessive. So for example, my dad has brown eyes, my mom has blue eyes, so I probably got an allele for brown and blue eyes, but because the brown one is dominant, I personally ended up with brown eyes. All right. So in order for a dominant gene to present itself, you typically need 1 copy. If you want a recessive gene to show itself, you typically need 2 copies. And they control what we look like and how we do. All right. So now, if you divide genes up into a smaller category, you get these things called codons. So every 3 rungs of the ladder equals 1 codon. And when your cell is either duplicating itself or trying to make proteins, mRNA will go in and make a copy, and then it will organize the little copies into codons and then match amino acids to the codons. I know that sounds really confusing, and it'll make more sense, I promise. So there's actually a mistake on here. There's only 20 amino acids. So let's say, for example, I have a DNA strand, or excuse me, an RNA strand, and the RNA strand has a codon where the bases on the ladder are A, U, G. I would use this codon wheel, go to A, and then U, and then G, and that leads me to this amino acid called methionine. All right, now in the cell, it would add methionine to this chain, and then add another amino acid to it, another amino acid to it, and then once you get the whole thing made, it equals a protein. So we will go into more detail about this later. Just know that when you add a bunch of amino acids together, you ultimately end up with a protein, and proteins are how your body works. So because I have brown eyes, there are proteins in my eyeballs right now making something in my eyeball look brown. All right. So I'm going to recap that one more time to make sure we are all on the same page. Cells, DNA, chromosomes, genes, codons, amino acids, proteins, you. All right, DNA, double ladder, and it's organized into chromosomes. You have 46 total, 23 pairs, one of each from mom and dad. Sections of a chromosome are called DNA. Oh my gosh, I just said that wrong. Sections of a chromosome are called genes. Genes code for specific things in your body. Genes are divided up into codons. Every 3 rungs of the DNA ladder is a codon. Each codon is transcribed into an amino acid, and when you add a bunch of amino acids together, you get a protein. Hope that makes sense.